Good afternoon. 506 News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up on this here program, Philip Lenczycki joins us. He's an investigative reporter for the Daily Caller News Foundation. We'll talk about how the Biden administration has been watering down the vetting process for, just illegal Chinese foreign nationals. No big deal. It's not like that's consequential or anything. Philip has the details ahead. You can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. I hope you are having an excellent new year. Big year, 2024. But let me take you back to the beginning of the Biden administration, as awful as that was for a moment. You remember after January 6th, and then subsequently after Joe Biden becomes president, the Biden administration decided that they would begin to hunt for white nationalism, white supremacy, right-wing extremism throughout the ranks of the government with a particular focus on the United States military. They were going to be searching high and low within the American military to find all of those racist bigots that are the cause of all of our problems here in America today. They promised that. They said, let's do it. So, in fact, Lloyd Austin, the defense secretary, they issued a stand-down order to the entire military, and everybody across all the services needed to be briefed on how to detect and how to avoid white supremacy and right-wing extremism. It was wild. And in the meantime, they also launched an investigation into just how much extremism they had going on in the military. And I don't know if you heard about this, but the study ended. And it came out, actually. The report came out. And in case you're wondering why you didn't hear anything about it, well, I've got some good news for you. There are no extremists in the military. Virtually none. The Wall Street Journal covers it now. They apparently picked up on it. They point out that it came out in December. It was quietly released. And they said, after reports that some service members participated in the January 6th riot, Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin ordered the independent study to get greater fidelity on extremism in the ranks. The think tank tasked with the report, the Institute for Defense Analyses, found, quote, no evidence that the number of violent extremists in the military is disproportionate to U.S. society. A review of Pentagon data suggested, quote, fewer than 100 substantiated cases per year of extremist activity by members of the military in recent years. That figure, the journal notes, could include a range of conduct and ideological bent, not simply white supremacy floated in the press. Take court-martials. Researchers found that the prevalence of, quote, extremist and gang-related activity that are reflected in court-martial opinions is limited to fewer than 20 cases since 2012. You got that? Since 2012, fewer than 20 cases. Gang activity isn't typically political, and if you exclude those cases, the journal says, the number falls to one. One ideological extreme case court-martialed since 2012. For more on this not-so-shocking news, Tony Shaffer joins us now. He's the president of the London Center for Policy Research and a CIA-trained former senior intelligence officer as well. Tony, good to have you with us, sir.
Hey, Vince, always great to be with you. And, I don't think anybody who knows the military, and you know the military, your father was a senior officer in the Corps, and you and I have a lot of mutual friends, and I think everybody that I know and I've served with, no matter their political beliefs, have all taken the oath and do believe that they're obligated to protect and defend the Constitution and, dare I say, America. So I'm not surprised by the results.
It's amazing. And yet the entire military was forced into this stand-down situation. Everybody was getting hectored about how they need to detect white supremacy. The press was running wild with all of these claims that the American military is full of bigots. In fact, the New York Times, Tony Shaffer, back in January of 2021, ran a piece soliciting Soviet-style reports on extremism in the military. The headline was, "Have you witnessed far-right extremism inside the military?" And then on the website, they had a form where you could submit all of the extremism that you've witnessed so that the New York Times could know about it.
So I may have been called in by the Pentagon on this, Vince, just saying maybe it may have happened, and I may have been asked by certain departments, how do we avoid implementing these Gestapo-style policies which would see everybody's social media turned into essentially a system of ratting each other out. This was a huge concern within the professional military. And these meetings may or may not have occurred. And I worked with them with these services. I don't want to say who they are because it may get them in trouble, but there was a clear effort to avoid this becoming professionalized. There were elements within the military who were being told by the Secretary of Defense, by Lloyd Austin, to establish internal monitoring systems. Get this, Vince, internal monitoring systems executed by internal security, that they would basically have literally dozens of administrators scouring people's social media every day. That's how close we came to actually having an established process for people looking over each other's soldiers. Could you imagine what that would have done to morale, to know that people are being encouraged, probably promoted, based on how they can rat people out? So look, that did not happen, but they wanted to go down that path.
Right, and you know this as a veteran yourself, that the military does have an unusual level of control over the people who are among its ranks. That's just true. They still, you can still get in trouble literally for adultery in the military. So there's clearly a level of control there that doesn't exist for the general population, civilians.
Correct.
But having said that, normally it involves problems that actually exist. And what we have here is, and this study demonstrates it, is there's no extremism. There's none. The active duty military is not beset by this problem of white supremacy, right-wing extremism, or whatever you want to describe. It's ridiculous. And this was burped out in December. The Pentagon, my guess and my suspicion is they didn't want anybody to know the result of this. They just wanted to check the box and move on. But boy, doesn't this expose them all as frauds. Do you think Lloyd Austin is a moron, or he did this intentionally to advance some sort of cruel agenda?
So, look, I know General Austin. I served for him in Afghanistan when he was a brigadier general. And I got to be careful here. I don't want to be disrespectful since he is serving as Secretary of Defense. I think he saw this as a political tool to basically improve his standing within the eyes of the White House. That's the way I look at it. Because, again, he served in the ranks, and he came through. We were in combat together. So why would you do something when you inherently know the people you serve with are not radical? Last time I checked, I think he's black. I think General Austin and the secretaries. So literally, we have a system that was based on merit, on ability, not on skin color or tribal leanings. If you're part of a radical group, so I think the answer is there for anybody who cares to look.
Yeah, but this is so crazy, isn't it? I mean, I don't know what he was like when he served alongside you. And I've heard good stories too, like the one you're telling me. But ever since then, he's transformed into the guy who wears 6 masks when he's standing on the tarmac, and he's like, he's literally weaponizing members of the military against each other to chase phantoms. That's insane.
Right. Well, again, I think that most of the people I dealt with recognized exactly what you're saying to be true and worked to undermine it, literally. I mean, it's one thing to say, hey, there's a problem, we need to face it. It's another thing, Vince, when people come together and say, there's not a problem here, yet they're trying to create a system of checks which would literally allow for people who don't like your political leanings to check up on you. That's what they were trying to do. And it became more of a loyalty to the powers in D.C. rather than being loyal to the Constitution. Now, remember, Vince, the left continues to try to weaponize patriotism against those who are patriotic. Somehow, if you want to call the republic a republic and not a democracy, oh, my God, you're a radical. I mean, that's where this is all going. And I think enough people who recognize the danger of going down that path of allowing for the professionalization of monitoring social media. For goodness sake, the Navy was trying to give people reprimands for having that 3% decal on their car, for God's sake. That's how extreme they wanted to go. And again, I think people backed it off. It's like, okay, people having a political opinion does not make them radical. It makes them an American.
Right. And so, this is just like the COVID jabs. I mean, it was a sorting mechanism. Yep. It was designed to force people out who would dare question the regime or have a different political opinion.
That's correct. And again, this is where I think Austin and others knew what was going on. They knew there was not radicalism within the military. Yeah, a few knuckleheads showed up, in the Capitol, This always happens. You have a few folks who get involved. But to your point, there's been gangs sending people into the military for training. Back in the 80s, when I was a lieutenant at Fort Bragg, I saw this firsthand. So that has always been there. It will always be there. There's a certain criminal kind of element that comes in and joins to get the training. But there's not a radical presence across the military that exists.
No, for sure. Yeah, and that's always been an issue. And and that's why they screen for tattoos and all sorts of things when you're trying to join the military. So there's an interesting this actual study, again, the one that was quietly released in December, is very interesting because it was done by this organization, the Institute for Defense Analyses, and they actually include a paragraph in their report that says that in so many words, that the Biden administration may be making things worse. That the real threat here is the division that Biden is sowing. They say that all of this focus on extremism in the military has actually made it so that some members of the military believe that they are being targeted for their views, and that this report found reason to believe that the risk to the military from widespread polarization and division in the ranks may be a greater risk than the radicalization of a few service members. And they say for this reason, IDA's recommendations focus more on steps that could be taken to address underlying causes of extremist behavior than on punitive responses to such behavior. But the message I'm getting here, Tony Shaffer, is that the Biden administration is actually creating problems in the military rather than addressing a problem that doesn't even exist.
They have. And again, the very predicate of this study directed by Lloyd Austin was meant to have the effect that we're talking about. The idea here is they wanted to find a way to quietly and permanently move those who serve in the military into a certain venue of thought. I'm trying to be very careful with my words here. And that venue would require not only that you pass those rigors of background check, which a lot of us have to do. The UCMJ still criminalizes things which the civilian society does not. But beyond that, Vince, they wanted to have another level of check that essentially would require you to essentially divorce yourself from certain political views, which, by the way, are accepted. People can have political opinions. They can have very strong political opinions. Those opinions can be exercised under the First Amendment, no matter if you're in uniform or not. That's what they were targeting, and I think that's what that study comes out saying. God bless the guys at IDA for actually coming to the conclusion in a way that is honest and says exactly what the problem is. It's the Biden White House. But then again, when is the Biden White House not a problem in these days?
It's amazing. It really is. Thank you, Tony Shaffer, for always giving us your honest take on all this. Really appreciate your time as always. A lot of breaking news today, as we so often get. Among breaking news items just out here in the last half hour, New Jersey Democrat Senator Bob Menendez has now been hit with a superseding indictment. Federal criminal charges allege that he made positive comments about Qatar in exchange for things of value, including luxury watches valued at over $10,000. He has money in his jacket pockets, in his closet, and gold bars, and on and on and on. That little breaking news alert brought to us by Benny Johnson, posting this to X, including a screen grab of the superseding indictment. What kind of watch is this? This is a nice watch. Wristwatches with prices ranging from $99.90, so just under $10,000, up to $23,990. Those are nice watches. I'm not a watch guy, so I can't really identify these things. I have no idea, but it's a nice one. Nice watches, multiple watches for that guy. So we'll let you know anything else there. I do think the Menendez story is interesting too. Like, obviously Menendez is corrupt, but like, why is the Biden DOJ going after him specifically? Who did he tick off over at the Justice Department that they're prosecuting Bob Menendez, a Democrat from New Jersey? And the funny thing is, like, Menendez is still in the Senate, still doing it. And John Fetterman of Pennsylvania, who's slowly regaining consciousness with each passing day, he's been saying, like, why is Menendez still in the Senate? We just kicked that crazy George Santos out of the House. Why can't we kick Menendez out of the Senate? Democrats are like saying, shut up. Shut up. Stop talking about that. So Fetterman has some questions, as do I. I have questions too. I'm right there with you, John, standing shoulder to shoulder. trying to figure out why Menendez is still in the United States Senate. So corrupt. So corrupt. Also breaking news today that the president of Harvard has been ousted. She claims she resigned. She also claims it's because of racism. No word of honor, no mention of her plagiarism. Claudine Gay didn't talk about that. All of her demonstrated times of plagiarism, or the fact that she was seemed to be cool with people calling for the genocide of Jewish people on campus. It depends on the context whether or not that's a problem. Here is CNN reporter Matt Egan making excuses for her earlier today.
These plagiarism allegations, where Claudine Gay has had to issue corrections, multiple corrections. Now, we should note that Claudine Gay has not been accused of stealing anyone's ideas in any of her writings.
Wait, what?
She's been accused of sort of more like copying other people's writings without attribution. So it's been more sloppy attribution than stealing anyone's ideas.
Oh, I see. So she didn't actually go into their brain and steal their ideas. She just waited until they expressed them on paper and then stole them. What? What is this excuse? CNN will twist itself into candy-coated pretzels in order to figure out a way to defend a lefty in good standing. Claudine, it's not, well, she didn't really steal their thoughts. She just stole their expression. What? What is this? It's the left is what it is. It's the left, once again. Over on MSNBC, they're upset that Republicans are making any headway here.
Broadly speaking, Alex, Republicans see these Ivy League institutions, these elite colleges, as an ideal foil for them to try to press their message, politically speaking.
Yeah, and so in such charming rhetoric, they are dancing on somebody's grave. But let's make the point, she is not leaving the campus. She is going to remain as a professor of government as well as African-American studies.
That's right, because the best thing you can be is a lefty. You're always protected. Hey, good afternoon to you. 5:35 here, Newstalk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. You can join us today, 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL is the number to get in on the program. Hope you're having a very happy New Year already. We've got some just wild illegal immigration stories for you today. I was laughing kind of in a sad way about what's going on in Maryland. There's a fight right now in Maryland. The Washington Times documents it today. Stephen Dinan writing for the Times about Howard County. And apparently the legal battle going on involves the student school board member. They have some of these school boards, in particular in Maryland, they have students on the school board. But the student representative who gets to vote on the school board for all sorts of important decisions, including whether or not the schools are open. In Howard County, the student was the deciding vote to keep the schools closed. It's like, why are you letting a child decide, the child oracle, keep the schools closed? The kid is not elected by all the people in Howard County. The kid's elected by the other kids in the school. So the children vote for that person, and then they keep the schools closed, and then mom and dad have to figure out what the hell they're going to do. Like, it's so crazy. It's nuts. So there's a battle going on in Howard County. And apparently in the court discussion, the lawyers for Howard County are admitting that that unique arrangement could be duplicated for things like, say, illegal immigrants. That if illegals wanted their own member of some government body, they could just vote for them. They could create that, like meaning the county could create that. And then they would have just an illegal immigrant representative elected only by illegal immigrants. And so everyone's, right now the legal process is playing out. People are like, really? That's what could happen? Oh, man. It's just so crazy. It's just so crazy. All right. More on the craziness in Maryland throughout the existence of this program. We'll keep covering that. But that's a great, important coverage in the Washington Times, which is the true hometown paper of Washington, D.C. Right now, though, I want to talk a little bit more about illegal immigration as it relates to Chinese foreign nationals. And we'll do that with a guy who covers China. He's the best in the business at it. Philip Lenczycki is here. He's an investigative reporter for the Daily Caller News Foundation. Philip, good to have you with us, sir.
Hey, good to talk with you again. I really appreciate it. That's high praise.
Of course. So Chinese illegal immigrants are definitely a growing problem, aren't they? Because, it used to be that crossing our southern border were a couple of our neighbor countries. Now we got a lot of Chinese foreign nationals. You might even say military-age males pouring into the country. What's that all about, Philip?
Yeah, that's correct. Apparently, since 2022, there's been an over 1,000% increase in Chinese illegal aliens coming into the United States. So much so that what our investigation that dropped today reports is that in April 2023, apparently the Customs and Border Protection sent an internal email which more or less removed vetting requirements for such illegal aliens.
In particular, Chinese foreign nationals?
Specifically, Chinese illegal immigrants. That's correct. And so what the email said was that, number one, a requirement for quote-unquote phone downloads was no longer in effect. Now, phone downloads are when the field agent who encounters an illegal alien will then take their phone, plug it into a machine, which will cross-reference its data with a database containing known terrorist organizations and other type of malign actors. So that requirement was removed. And secondly, there had been a pre-existing long-format in-depth interview consisting of approximately 40 questions that the field agents were required to administer to Chinese illegal aliens that they encountered. That was also removed after this April 2023 email. And in its place was a 5-question, quote-unquote, 5 basic questions. And those came from that longer list of 40 questions.
Okay. A lot of questions. The first one is, why the change? What's the official explanation for why they narrowed the questions from 40 to 5 and stopped scanning the cell phones of illegal Chinese foreign nationals?
There is no official explanation as of right now. And the reason for that is that the information that we received was a email that was leaked to us by a source who remains anonymous.
Yes.
And so the powers that be refused to speak with us, and so there is no official acknowledgement.
But the email exchange itself, Philip, doesn't even lay out a rationale internally for why they're doing this?
No. And the individual who communicated with us, as well as other experts with whom we spoke, explained the rationale as this. Due to the huge spike in not only Chinese illegal immigrants, but just across the board, the agency, or the powers that be felt compelled to institute this simplification, this, bastardization of the process. And what ultimately was occurring was that prior to this, when agents intercepted Chinese nationals, it would take between 2 and sometimes 3 hours to process these individuals because, of course, field agents don't typically know, Chinese, so they were conducting a lot of the interviews through Google Translate. Sometimes they might have certain outsourced translators that could help them with the task, but most times not. So it was taking a long time, and the numbers were becoming, so high that they were just really unable to cope. So that is sort of the impetus that was described to me, but it's not stated within the email.
Yeah. So they're trying to just, rush people through the process. They're like, oh, this is too much of a backup. One thing that I just came to mind as you were explaining that they're using Google Translate in a lot of these conversations is normally, like, if you were conducting an interview and somebody who speaks the same language you do, you're able to read their body language and their answers and detect deception and figure out, okay, maybe we need to subject this guy to greater scrutiny. If you're using Google Translate, you're probably missing all of those cues.
100%. Absolutely. And when there was another method that was described to me, it's not stated in the email, but what was described to me is that should there be an individual in, let's say, a group of illegals crossing the border, and sometimes these groups can have upwards of 100 people or more of one nationality, but should there be an individual who does speak English, they will be more or less appointed as the de facto leader of the group, who will then be, the intermediary between the agents and the, others. And so in that case, these cartels and these human smuggling operations are quite savvy, and they quickly learned, apparently, after the implementation of this policy, how to, coach these illegals on how to successfully navigate the questions. And so you can imagine that if there was one individual who had who could speak English and could really tell the stories well, he could get everyone through.
Yeah, like the head scam artist is taking care of business for everybody. Yeah, this is amazing. So do we know anything about the substance of the questions? 5. It used to be 40. It's now 5. Are these questions like, how many fingers am I holding up? What is the questioning process like now?
Not much more difficult to pass, unfortunately. And so the 40 questions, we'll start there, contained all types of things that you would imagine, like, who are you? Where do you come from? Who are your parents? How did you get here? What's going on with the smuggling networks? They're trying to figure things out, it seemed like. Now, the 5 questions focus on, we're told, and this is through the interpretation of the individual who gave this to us and experts, and that's that all the questions pertain to either trying to tease out membership in the Chinese government, Chinese Communist Party, Chinese military, or one of the questions pertains to terrorism. And so the questions themselves are asking about employment, university, place of birth, military service, and party affiliation.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's a lot easier to memorize the answer to 5 questions than it is 40. I mean, if the question is, are you a terrorist? You're like, no. Okay, next question. Right. I mean, it's like, what?
Right. And so in all those questions, I believe you could just say no, except for place of birth. The person, as long as they don't say Xinjiang province, so that'd be far western Xinjiang province, and as long as they don't claim to be a Uyghur, which is one of the ethnic minorities from that province, then they would be home free.
Amazing. So the part where you mentioned that we're no longer scanning cell phones. So if a Chinese foreign national happens to have a phone on them, based on your description, it sounds to me like they were scanning the contact list on those phones, trying to figure out who they know or are in contact with. So if they have the Chinese version of Osama bin Laden on their phone, that would be a red flag. But we're not even scanning phones anymore?
Correct. And so my understanding is that they had not even been doing phone downloads on everyone that they encountered. That was reserved for those who, raised some type of concern. And the phone downloads would look through, I believe, the phones, in its entirety. So after about a week ago, there was a story that one of my colleagues, a great reporter, Jenny Terr, reported on concerning a Chinese, it was actually a Chinese illegal who was arrested, and child pornography was found on their phone. And afterwards, our source contacted me and said that's the type of thing that the phone downloads used to be able to pick up. So it wouldn't only be limited to that. They said also that they would use that to learn more about the smuggling networks. A lot of what's going on with the Chinese, and a lot more research needs to go into this, is they're doing their communication on encrypted Chinese, social media platforms like WeChat. And so it's very difficult for our authorities to, surveil them apparently otherwise.
Yeah. Meanwhile, China does kind of dragnet cell phones in their own country, don't they?
Oh, absolutely. No doubt all these programs have, back doors where the powers that be over there can snoop on all the users.
Yeah, to include people who come and visit China. Whereas here in the United States, we've decided to fly blind when Chinese foreign nationals are coming in illegally.
That seems to be the case. I mean, we've heard of these programs like, PRISM or something like that was supposed to be capturing all information, but apparently that's not really used as we might hope it would be.
So when you ask for answers from the Biden administration, what do they give? Did they give you anything? Did they say we're not going to talk to you right now, or have they just decided not to even respond? What's the status of
Correct.
the official statement here?
Nothing. No response. And we're looking into how to get that information otherwise.
And is that the normal routine with them when you ask these types of questions?
I wouldn't want to give a blanket answer for how the entire government works. Sometimes there are some very cooperative people in government. And
sure, but I mean DHS and Border Patrol.
I wouldn't want to comment on that. I think that there have been some helpful people.
Okay.
But I think that in this matter, my suspicion is that they don't have anything good to say.
This is a tight report, though. This is not sloppy in any way, characteristic of your talents, because it's a good piece of reporting, and I can tell you, I won't put words in your mouth. I will say that I believe they don't want to dignify the reporting by responding to it, but the reality here is you've got them dead to rights. They're not screening these Chinese foreign nationals in any meaningful way anymore. They used to do it with 40 questions and a phone scan. Now it's 5 questions, no phone scan, and we've got a 1,000% increase in these Chinese foreign nationals, specifically military-age males, pouring into the country. We have Border Patrol agents who don't even speak Mandarin, and they're translating their interviews, their 5-question interviews over Google Translate. This is a disaster, and the reason we know about it is your reporting. So Philip Lenczycki from the Daily Caller News Foundation, thank you very much. Really appreciate your time today and your reporting as always.
Thank you, Vince.
Yeah, good to talk to Philip. So how about that? So that's a good piece of original reporting on an important topic, and you have people who have access to this going, this is insane. We've got to get it out there. So they go to a guy like Philip and say, Philip, can you please share this? And this is not Honduras flowing into this is China across our southern border. No one's going to possibly be like, that's actually kind of crazy. It's Looney Tunes is what it is. Let's go to the phones. We've got Brad calling in from Fairfax. Line 1, Brad, good afternoon. You're on the Vince Colonnade Show.
Hi, Vince. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Brad, go for it.
Okay, so there's a complicating factor for the border agents, even if they're using Google Translate. The way an American is going to react in terms of facial expression, gestures, body language, vocal tone is going to be radically different from culture to culture. The way an American reacts can be very different from a Latino, from a Middle Easterner, from an African, from an Eastern European, from a Chinese. There's very different body language from culture to culture. And, without having that filled in, too, by a native translator, it's really almost impossible to try and read whether someone's lying to you or not.
Yes. I mean, this is why the American military was for instance, in Afghanistan and Iraq, relied on native translators who could help them both navigate not just translation, but cultural exchanges and whether that guy's lying to me, that kind of stuff. It's essential, isn't it?
Exactly.
Yeah. Thanks, Brad. No, it's a good point. And it's one that I raised with Philip a moment ago, which is that, wait a second, Google Translate, that literally everything gets lost in translation then. You don't even know. It's hard to detect the deception and everything else going on. So the big important point in any sort of screening is just, are your spidey senses going off? Is there something going on here? Well, we can't even ask those questions anymore. Hey, I've got some breaking news for you. Fox News with this headline: Judge dismisses 3 civil counts against Trump. You see this? They just dismissed 3 civil counts against Trump and others over the death of January 6th officer Brian Sicknick. A federal judge today has dismissed most of the civil counts against former President Donald Trump and 2 others in connection with the death of Capitol Police Officer Brian Sicknick. In a 12-page ruling, U.S. District Judge Amit Mehta dismissed 3 of the 5 civil counts in the lawsuit filed last January by Sandra Garza, Sicknick's girlfriend. Garza's lawsuit against Trump and the January 6 rioters, Julian Cater and George Tanios, sought damages from all 3 men for claims of wrongful death, conspiracy to violate civil rights, and negligence per se, based on D.C.'s anti-riot law. In his ruling Tuesday, Mehta dismissed the Wrongful Death Act count and both negligence per se allegations. Fox points out that he died of natural causes from a series of strokes, according to the D.C. medical examiner, and not from What was it they had said before? A fire extinguisher, a homicide. No, Sicknick died a day after or so, the events of January 6th. He died of natural causes, the medical examiner found. And a judge throwing out a bunch of the charges here against Trump and others. So usually a lot of these legal stories involving Trump, it's always like new charges for Trump, new lawsuit against Trump. This one, charges dismissed. Hey, coming up next here on WMAL, the great one, Mark Levin's excellent radio program. Stay with us. Talk to you tomorrow.